Hello, everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast. And on this episode, we are going to discuss navigating the timeline split. So the world seems to have split into these two distinct timelines, two different perceptions of reality. This has become more pronounced since the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020. The polarization, especially in the U.S., but it's definitely happening in Canada and other parts all over the world. It really seems to be increasing. And as we head into Pluto and Aquarius, I think that this fragmentation is not going to just resolve overnight. It actually may become more pronounced. So obviously in the U.S., we had Trump, who just got elected. And one side, one timeline in the U.S. is in mourning, believing that the U.S. is now under a fascist dictatorship where all their rights are being taken away, while the other side is celebrating what feels like a win for truth, freedom, and humanity. And I also want to nod to some other perspectives out there. There's some people who just refuse to get involved in what is going on. I think they're more the people who just want to be left alone, so to speak. But as well, in wanting to be left alone, I think that they're not really wanting to see exactly clearly what's going on here. So I've heard many people think it's just two wings of the same bird. It's just another selection with these two wings. Very common point of view. I personally don't think it's just another election because we are in the midst of the Pluto return of America. Pluto conjunct South Node will be coming up in the next few years. I think that this is a major turning point in the history of the U.S. That being said, I've also seen people take this non-dual spiritual bypass using the concept that all is one to avoid acknowledging their own subjective experience, their own subjective opinions. I would argue that many of these people are not actually in a non-dual enlightened state of awareness, but use this idea that all is one to bypass the experience of their own soul, which has its feelings, preferences, subjective experiences. And, you know, the way that I see it, I think the truth is that we've come into this world to learn through polarities, the darkness and the light, male and female. And deny this is to deny a fundamental aspect of human existence. I've also seen this non-dual position be used as a form of bypassing your own mental and emotional issues, because since all is one, why have any feelings? Why have any opinions? It can easily be used for people who don't have a sense of self because of trauma to justify that sense of self. And then lastly, we have another side who's become completely what we call black-pilled, meaning stuck in a very doom and gloom, depressive, negative mindset. A lot of them are prepping for some sort of end time scenario. They can't see any good in what has happened because they're seeing humanity as rushing towards a transhumanist technocracy with no way out. And everyone who supports Trump or is on either side, actually, they're all evil and they're all transhumanists and they all have their own negative agenda. So very black and white thinking there. So in this podcast, we're going to discuss all these different point of views we're seeing. So from the liberals to the black pill truthers to the anarchists to the conservatives, we're going to talk about also specifically some of the details of the left's response, this 4B movement, and then there's also this Aqua Tofana movement, which is interesting, which we'll discuss more about. We're going to discuss what we might see may happen. And in general, themes that we might see happen going on from now until the next, 4-8 years and beyond, basically. Because either way, it's going to be a rocky head of time for the U.S. and it's not over. We're going to talk about how this all ties into the Pluto return of America, Pluto re-entering Aquarius, where it's going to stay for 20 years. And most of all, we're going to discuss how we can navigate this timeline split, how we can deal with family members who maybe believe that the world is ending, how we can maybe have conversations with them when it's possible. If you want to wake people up, maybe some techniques on how you can do that, if they're curious, if they're open. And in the second hour, so for those who are new to the podcast, we're going to really discuss how this all ties into the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020. Why are we seeing this tilt towards conservatism, not just in the US, but worldwide? What does this have to do with larger cycles in history, larger cycles in time? How does this relate to this trauma that we're experiencing? And then lastly, how especially what I find fascinating is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction also has a correlation with a concept called psychological splitting, which is where you see things in black and white, all good or all bad, i.e., you agree with me, you're good. You disagree with me, you're bad, you're evil, you're Hitler, etc. So how does this Saturn-Pluto conjunction tie into this concept of psychological splitting that we're seeing happening on overdrive right now? And how can we deal with this big impact of it, which I think is like the most hardest thing for people to manage, is like, you can't just have a difference of opinion now. If you have a difference of opinion, for some people, you're literally a fascist, like Hitler supporter. It's very extreme. So how can we deal with that in our own personal lives? How can we deal with that within ourselves, especially? We're going to discuss that all in the second hour. And if you want to become a member, you can go to veilofreality.com/membership if you aren't already, and you can get access to every second hour. So before we go into that, a quick announcement. We are going to do another round of Embodied Soul Awakening. Technically it actually begins in January, but we're going to open for the pre-work end of December, and it's going to go until the end of March. Again, it's limited to 35 people. It's a psychospiritual online group coaching program. We go into a lot of the topics that we talk about on our podcast and more. And we have about 10 spots left right now. So if you want to join us, you can go to thetimeoftransition.com. This is actually we are going to take a little bit of a break from this because we have another project that we're going to launch after this. So if you want to join us, we're going to take a break after this, basically. So don't ask us like when the next one will be after this, because we're going to launch something else that you also might be interested in as well that we have in the works. So if you want to join us, go to thetimeoftransition.com. All right, so let's just talk about all these different perspectives that have happened since the bomb got dropped. And it seems that Trump not only won the Senate, but the popular
electoral vote and
the electoral and popular vote. Exactly. So, and also I want to keep in mind, I'm not holding my breath for some reasons, which I'll mention later. Things are still tense. This doesn't mean that like, all of a sudden, like, you know what I mean? Like, I have a sense that they have something up their sleeve.
Yeah, it almost went too easy, no?
Yeah.
In the sense, in terms of election interference and all of that. But yeah, this past week was pretty intense, even leading up to it, even energetically. We felt this in the collective, right? And all of that. But yeah, everybody knows Trump won the elections, both the electoral and the popular vote. And it's very interesting because over the years, we have seen different reactions towards Trump. Excuse me. And as Laura pointed out, most people in the consensus world, of the liberal left, they see Trump literally as a reincarnation of Hitler, and Trump supporters as racist Nazis, and all of them. On the opposite hand, conservatives definitely support Trump, but it's also interesting to note that since Trump's victory, they're also taking a very cautious look or observant eye on who he's going to install in his administration, making sure no neocons or anybody from the old political system or world career politicians and bureaucrats won't be part of his administration. It's very interesting, actually, on X or Twitter to observe all of this in real time.
Which he does have, I just got to add, he has Mars in the 12th house. He has Pluto in the 12th house. To me, I think having hidden enemies, like enemies amongst him, is actually part of his karmic situation. And I'm not sure like how completely avoidable it is, especially when you're working in politics, by the way.
No, it won't definitely not be a smooth ride. I don't see any like a clean sweeping out the deep state and he just being the savior. I've never held these extreme views. I had never held either views, neither see him as a savior who's just going to clean everything up and usher us into the golden age, nor do I see him as many in the quote-unquote truther community, right? That he's an inversionist, a Luciferian deceiver, or he's actually part of the deep state and the elite and ushering us into a technocratic enslavement. He has been pre-selected. Nobody can be elected. Everything is a psyop. So that's kind of the black-pilled mindset, as I call it, extreme negativity and seeing psyops everywhere, really lacking nuance, right? And it's not either or, but something higher is happening because the more, from my perspective, I see Trump as a necessary evolutionary force in the context of the evolution of consciousness, and he plays an important role that is beyond good or bad. Then you have the anarchist view, right? Or the idea that, as Laura mentioned, it's just two wings of the same bird. All government is evil, statism is a disease. And I have to say that for the longest time, if people know my work, especially on Veil of Reality, I held those, especially those 2 points, similar to the black pill truther, that doesn't matter who gets in power, they're all part of the same team, all part of the deep state, they're pre-selected. And I've been an anarchist for many, many years, since the 90s, literally. Never believed in government, never voted. Statism is evil, it's a religion. I've read all the literature from Emma Goodman to Larkin Rose. I spoke at anarchist conferences. I've written plenty of articles literally talking about the illusion of choice, two wings of the same bird, and so on and so forth. But now, after all these years, not only with research, but also my inner development, I start to see it more nuanced. I don't see it as black and white anymore. And even I would argue, yes, back with even the Clinton years, the Bush years, and Obama years, past 30 years, it was most likely very much so two wings of the same bird, all part of this elite neocon group, so to speak, getting into power, both Democrats and Republicans on the same team. But what emerged, and even when Trump first came in power, I didn't pay much attention at all in 2016, very much embedded in my anarchist views. But then I was very curious how much opposition he created and what was really going on, the projections and what, and then dove a bit deeper. And I realized now this is not what's happening now in the US, especially if we look at also what Laura will get deeper into it in the context of the Pluto return from evolutionary astrology. This is not two wings of the same bird anymore. There's something else happening, right? And there's something good happening as well, which doesn't imply, again, that Trump, for example, is all good, that he's a savior and all of that. No, it's very much a mixed bag from different levels. But we need to get out of this oversimplistic black and white view that is actually based on psychological splitting, seeing as all good or all bad, and develop a more nuanced view, which you can access on higher levels of consciousness. You're not that caught up in the dualities, which doesn't mean you fall into the other trap, as Laura mentioned. You believe yourself to have transcended duality and just mentally kind of overestimate yourself, basically, and then don't want to take any sides and you think you're all above it. I've been all that. I had my own anarchist ego or my spiritual ego looking down on politics, that's for the lower people, and I thought I've woken up and all the voters or people who engage in it are just asleep. And I don't see this anymore like that. I see everybody has a certain evolutionary higher role. This may be mixed with their own ignorance and imperfections, just like you are imperfect, right? We have this childish idea that whoever is going to lead needs to expose everything according to our own subjective truth, right? And
they need to be perfect is also an aspect of splitting. They need to be absolutely perfect.
And I see here a lot, in which I used to speak out against, Trump is a Zionist, or he, pushed Operation Warp Speed. Yeah, there's many things I don't fully agree with whatever he did, but maybe there's more to the story. Maybe there's something else going on without this really oversimplified and frankly childish black and white view, which I've been there too.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I remember actually in 2016 when Trump got elected, and I was literally in a cabin on an island by myself trying to live off grid, very unsuccessfully, by the way. Like, just, I was already ready to exit society. And I remember seeing all these people melt down. I mean, I was also retreating because I was in my own healing journey. And I never had TDS. I never hated Trump. I never saw him to be Hitler. I never watched the news. So I didn't know what was going on. I could just see that people were beginning to psychologically break, right? And I've personally gone through my own journey with it. Meaning, like, even up until RFK Jr. joined, I was like, well, this guy supports the vaccine. Operation Warp Speed, whatever, like he needs to take accountability for that. And there's still many things I'm just in the camp of, like, I don't know how it's going to work out. It sounds really great, especially like my views and beliefs align way more with RFK Jr. But I don't know how it's going to turn out. They have really big plans. I can see astrologically, which I'm going to share as the podcast goes on, how America is in the need for a really big shift, and we need these Aquarius type people to bring that in. Not to say that they're Aquarians, but they bring in this revolutionary spirit. And also, I don't consider myself to be a traditional conservative in many ways, actually. I just think the left moved so far left, and I just stayed in the middle, that I'm probably more moderate in many ways. So I don't personally see him as a savior. I don't have TDS. I do think the left has gone too far. And when, they've gone too far when they've become the party of war, become the party of abusing children. Through this gender affirming care for minors. So I don't see things in black and white. There's things that I agree with him. There's things that I disagree with him. But I do think this needed to happen to swing the pendulum in the other direction. And it's very interesting because I'm coming from the perspective of someone who was very, very, very far left and into a lot of the concepts that are popularized now that I disagree with. In my early 20s, before my prefrontal cortex developed, by the way. So, I want to share a little bit about the left's response, because I actually have two different Twitter accounts. I have one that is actually more conservative, and then I have one that's super, super liberal. And I find it's really useful, just in general, to expose yourself to the different point of view and try and be objective with it. Meaning you don't have to, like, agree with everyone. You can have your own subjective experience, but just try and zoom out and, like, instead of naming them as, like, brainwashed zombies, whatever, fascists on one side, just try and, like, understand, where they're coming from. So, we can see the conservatives are mainly celebrating, but they're watching what happens closely. A lot of them don't think it's over yet. They think something's going to happen. Kamala may try to overturn it. And the left's response, which I've been watching on Twitter, number one, many think the election was stolen, which is just hilarious because you weren't allowed to say that the election was stolen anymore ever since January 6th. Kamala is actually currently fundraising for a recount in certain swing states. The main argument they don't have proof of this, but this is their theory, is they believe that Elon Musk implanted Starlink into swing states and then somehow this connected, I guess, to the voter machines and helped steal the election. So that's, like, the dominant theory that a lot of people believe, by the way. And then I also want to talk about the kind of protests. So the biggest one, there's this 4B movement, which is a radical feminist movement. It started in North Korea. 4B stands for the 4 no's. So no sex, no dating, no marrying men, and no children. So women in South Korea are doing this to protest what's going on there until they have equal rights as men. And now many women in the US are saying they will do the same. The main difference is, as of right now, all women have equal rights to men. As men, it's not the same as what's going on in South Korea. And interestingly, men in the ages like 20 to 30 are becoming more conservative while women are becoming more liberal. So there's a huge divide in the sexes building there. There's also another movement called Aqua Tofana, also known as MAGTA, short for Make Aqua Tofana Great Again, who are advocating for the killing of Donald Trump supporters through a poison called Aqua Tofana, which is very, I came across this actually on TikTok. I didn't really understand it at first. And I was like, oh, they're actually advocating for like poisoning men. And hopefully they want to do it in a way that it can't be tracked that they killed someone.
Yeah. It's very fascinating to observe this liberal meltdown, especially liberal women. You see it all over TikTok and Twitter making these videos of like, we're going to hold sex for 4 years, not dating men, not marrying, no children. Which there's a divine irony because, first of all, you have to have compassion for these women because it's full on psychosis, because it's a extreme knee-jerk reaction to Trump's victory based on complete illusions. They have a view of Trump that is not based on reality whatsoever. It's just a result of legacy media propaganda, seeing him as Hitler, as a fascist, and even lies because he's not taking any women's rights away. Even there will be no ban on national abortion. Even Kamala and others were pushing that. None of that is going to happen or is happening. Women still have the same rights. You're still going to get an abortion, but they're going so far off the rails, which ironically, then there's no need for abortion with them not wanting to have children and dating anybody.
Okay, so I want to speak to that. There is no national abortion ban. Roe v. Wade was overturned, and that led it up to the states because Roe v. Wade, basically being overturned, decided that this is not constitutionally protected. The states need to do this. By the way, even in Arizona, a swing state, which is also very, at least like 50% red or more, they voted to like overturn more strict rules on abortion. So it's actually going the direction that the leftists want in many states.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's definitely pro-Trump, but they voted for abortion.
Yeah, but the thing is the president cannot enact an abortion ban, and they also can't make abortion federally legal. The Supreme Court decided this was a state issue.
Yeah.
So this propaganda that Trump is going to enact an abortion ban, he's literally refuted in his own words, for starters. But the president cannot do that anyway. So this is a lot of hysterics. Some people also think that Trump will immediately annul all the gay marriages in the country. And that's also not happening. On top of this, many are wearing masks again in protest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you didn't see that?
I didn't see it.
Many are going to be moving to another country. There's also a whole movement of women shaving their heads to protest the rights that they think are being taken away. Many, and I've seen literally people like post with like tens of thousands of comments say that they will be cutting off family members who support Trump. I also saw multiple posts from both astrologers and therapists who said, unfollow me if you voted for Trump, you're not welcome here. So there's really intense polarization. It's pretty clear. And I think if you're dealing with people like this, it's important to address the part of themselves that is emotional and is afraid and have true empathy and compassion for that. And once you feel like they're in a more calm, centered place and they feel seen in however they're feeling, then to really ask them where it is that they saw this is going to happen. So, where is the clause? Where does Trump say he's going to ban gay marriage? And because a lot of this is mainstream media propaganda. And I do think there has to be like some sort of repercussion for the level of propaganda that has been spread through the mainstream media, because it's really driven people insane. And then, maybe you can discuss a little bit about what Trump came out immediately and said after he got.
Well, he's made some great statements. He had a whole 10-point, which really the main thing was about free speech, taking the power away from even social media or federal involvement in social media and the legacy media to, cutting off the Mockingbird, Operation Mockingbird, which is CIA involvement and federal involvement in the news agencies, using them as a propaganda outlet. This is a true project. People can look that up. It's not a conspiracy theory. So he's actually also initiating less government. He just came out of dissolving the federal, Institution for Education department,
And he put out a plan to dismantle the deep state.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all part of it. And, giving more power back to the people. And his big thing is about the tariffs, which everybody's freaking out, even hinting at possibly dissolving the Fed and the money printing and even the income tax and all of that. He even said he will abolish income tax already for firefighters, police officers, and others. This is huge, right? This is kind of truly making America great again going back to the 1900s when there was no Federal Reserve, when there was no income tax. And interestingly, the left liberals, they're so in the knee-jerk reaction, they will probably fight for the Federal Reserve, which is unconstitutional, by the way, or even income taxes. And who came out in support, which is great? Ron Paul, the ultimate libertarian, the OG who already wanted to abolish the Fed a decade ago and even longer, and even income taxes because it's simply not necessary. This debt, money printing enslavement system. And interestingly, he had an interaction with Elon Musk and they wanted to talk together. So there's something else happening that really his intention is also what it seems is basically just less government, right? And taking out the corruption and the bureaucracy out of Washington, basically.
He also came out yesterday or maybe the day before to stop gender-affirming care for minors, which is very controversial to a lot of leftists who believe in what they call gender-affirming care. So if you have a child who is going to be entering puberty and believes that they're not the sex that they were born as, they can now get hormone blockers to stall puberty and to prevent them from going through like voice changes or growing breast, etc., which does have quite detrimental health effects. So he really went hard on gender affirming care, and I can see how the left is going to be freaking out about that because that really goes against their own belief systems that doctors assign your sex at birth. It's not biological, that trans kids can know that they're trans as soon as they're, as soon as they can talk, basically. And that we should medically change their gender in accordance to the gender that they think they are.
It's huge too. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of things actually are good happening, and you can even see it from a black pill perspective. Oh, this is just deception. We're going to usher us into the technocratic age and full-on control. And even Elon Musk, he's the devil. He's the Ahrimanic incarnation of the technocrat. So, but, again, it's not about this black and white view. We have to really have a higher, more nuanced vision, again, in the context of the evolution of consciousness.
And
something bigger is happening.
And a higher, more nuanced vision is one where we don't know.
That's a good point. Resting in the unknown. Yes.
We don't know. Seems good. Let's see how it plays out. Not in a cynical way, but just to to be able to look at things objectively, see where things are good. You can see where parts you disagree with and see how things play out.
Yes.
Predicting that it's all going to end up all bad or all good is a sign of splitting, which we'll talk more about in the second hour. But either way, there's going to be a rocky time ahead in the U.S. It's not over. We also, what we might see happen, which I shared about on our previous election podcast, where I shared about, especially in the second hour, I shared RFK Jr.'s connection to the U.S. What was it called again? It was called Mastering Emotions Amid Chaos and America's Election Astrology. So we talked about how Trump relates to the U.S.'s chart, how Kamala does, how RFK Jr. does. And if you're curious about my analysis about them from an evolutionary astrology perspective, listen to part 2 of that podcast. But the main thing is that there's going to be counter movements rising up in protest to him being elected. One theory that I shared might happen is that Trump right now seems like he's getting elected, but then Kamala might become president or find a way, meaning she might take Joe Biden's place, not between then and now. That might be a big possibility. There's already talks about that. and she might find a way to reverse or contest the election. Perhaps not, but it's not going to be a smooth sailing ahead. And don't forget, we're still in the midst of the Pluto return of America, and what's happening now will influence the next 246, 48 years to come. And we're in the second house, so we're looking at the second house issues, the economy, values. You can see that the economy could literally go through an insane transformation here, especially with these talks of getting rid of the Federal Reserve. Trump has also become very pro-Bitcoin all of a sudden. So for those who obviously have a Bitcoin portfolio, you're celebrating right now.
New all-time highs.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we're in the midst of this Pluto return of America, and we're thinking about what values will need to be shed, what values need to be strengthening. Pluto entering Aquarius, where it's going to stay for 20 years, is going to join the South Node Aquarius of America's chart. So this is really the reuniting of the original energy that the founding fathers carried, which is one of radical change, which is one of rebellion, which is about transforming the existing old world Capricorn system. And I think that many will be grieving this old world they have lost and even fighting to hold on to it. Like, I've even seen tweets of people like, I need to add fluoride back into my water. I want to add glyphosate back into my food. I know it sounds funny.
But for context, because RFK wants to take it out.
Exactly. And what is happening now, this is why it's not just another election, is because what is happening now in the years to come is a symbol for what's unfolding in the soul and the destiny of America. That's what Pluto is about. And it's not about any politician saving us in Aquarius. It's about we the people, which is an Aquarian keyword that I'm attaching to this, who ultimately saved ourselves. Like, there's a lot of people who breathed a huge sigh of relief because they created a collective cultural shift that even allowed someone like RFK Jr. to come into power and for people to pay attention to him. So it was the rebels and outsiders of the people who created this collective shift. And, you know, there's a lot of people who still think that many of us are still some far right conspiracy theorists. And I think that over time, we're going to see some of them will harden more and become very almost like develop their own counter-revolutionary movements all over, right? They're going to think we live in a fascist regime and we need to create resistance to that. That's already happening. But then I think this could be a critical turning point, like a disillusionment moment where people are going to be like, what happened? And they're going to go looking for answers, and they're going to discover how the mainstream media has lied to them, how there's been this other story going on. But this is really about reuniting America on this energy of the band of rebels and outsiders who originally founded the US. And these are the people who are also going to rebirth America as Pluto enters Aquarius.
Which is beautifully symbolized in this whole people behind or with Trump, because like I mentioned before, this is not just about Trump, but you have Tulsi Gabbard, very strong woman coming from as a disillusioned Democrat. You have Vivek, this Indian guy, right? Extremely astute, very high IQ, very well spoken, right? He's not even a Christian. He has his own Hindu religion. You have Elon Musk. Think about what you want. He's an autistic guy, but he has done tremendous work in his own way. He freed Twitter, free speech, right? He has his own vision for Mars and his own technological inventions. I don't think it's black and white in that sense that he's just going to be this technocratic wolf in sheep clothing. And then you have RFK Jr., who has, you beautifully, by the way, showed this from an evolutionary perspective, how he has strong karmic ties to the US and a very important role to play.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of thing, because of RFK Jr., Trump got so much support as well, because what he wants to do is really get at the core of creating a health revolution as well.
Yeah, which is very interesting because the South Node of the moon is going to switch into Virgo, which means the North Node will be in Pisces in January 2025.
Wow.
And RFK Jr. literally said on January something 2025, he's going to eliminate or ban fluoride from being put into the water.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of emphasis on clearing up some of the issues around public health. There's going to be a focus on mind, body, spirit health. This is all going to be part of this collective dream for a better future, which connects to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction I'll talk about in the second hour. But there is going to be a true health revolution. And I would argue there's going to be a lot of idealism around this in 2025. Like, how can we clean up the health? How can we create a better vision for the future? So let's see. Like, I honestly, if I've never heard a politician speaking in those language before, and I don't consider RFK Jr. to be a politician, I think he's more going to be like a helper behind the scenes who can do a lot of work. But there could be a lot of positive movements in that arena, and I want to just acknowledge that. And I also want to say that there's a less fun side of Aquarius from an evolutionary astrology perspective. It relates to collective trauma, fragmentation, splitting, trauma that happens in groups of people, insanity, mental illness. So, Aquarian is known for like this individualistic, rebelistic energy where they're really freeing themselves from the constrictions of the past. That's one timeline. And I think we will see people become very fragmented, very in shock about what happened. And we are going to see a whole group of people who are going to experience this as a trauma. And this is mainly going to be from this intense media propaganda and brainwashing that has led them to believe that they're now under a fascist regime of Hitler 2.0. And, for some, this could be a critical moment of disillusionment, which can lead to a deeper awakening. And I think some may stay in this place their whole lives. We have been under psychological warfare. I've already seen people go through the stages of grief. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, denial. Like, there's a lot of people who literally say Kamala did win. We just don't know it yet. There's anger, and this is going to be against anyone who voted for Trump. We're already kind of seeing that, but the anger is going to get even more intense, I think. And the way, what I want to just share too is like, psychologically, I was prepared for whatever way we went, right? If obviously, like, my own preference was not for Kamala to get elected. However, I wasn't going to like hedge my whole emotional and spiritual health on it. One of the biggest things that I thought about, actually, I was like, well, what if she does win? I can't just like collapse into like a total trauma. I can't put all my stock into this. Actually, a lot of my happiness is not found in this. It's just kind of part of like what I've been paying attention to lately. But I realized, especially during moments like this, like some of the darkest moments in human history have birthed some of the like most revolutionary creative works of arts, works of genius, from books, music, whatever. So I was going to like fuel that into creativity. And I would also suggest that if you know someone who's struggling, or if you're struggling, I don't know if you're struggling, you listen to this podcast because you probably get too triggered. You probably wouldn't make it to this point. But if you know people who are struggling, I think we need to work with this Leo polarity to heal the dissociation that was caused. So turn your suffering into something creative. Alchemize your pain, create something with it. It can really heal you in a very profound way because it unites conscious and unconscious parts of your psyche. It can create a sense of meaning in you again. And this is really this Leo polarity again, is I think that if people are going through a lot right now, if you can point them towards healing their heart and soul so they can create something out of their suffering, I think it could really help them.
Yeah, I also want to just circle back real quick. When you were speaking about Robert Kennedy Jr., he had an amazing, and his promise to remove fluoride from the water and the health revolution. He had a very amazing tweet come up just last week around the elections, where he writes, here we go. FDA's war on public health is about to end. This includes its aggressive suppression of psychedelics, peptides, stem cells, raw milk, hyperbaric therapies, chelating compounds, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamins, clean food, sunshine, exercise, nutraceuticals, and anything else that advances humans' health and can be patented by pharma. If you work for the FDA and are part of the corrupt system, I have two messages for you. One, preserve your records, and 2, pack your bags. This is huge, and they're already panicking in the FDA and Big Pharma. And I would even say that RFK Jr. really needs protection because the FDA and Big Pharma mafia is not going to give up that easily, right? But we see this new knee-jerk reaction on the left, like Lord just mentioned, just because Trump won and RFK Jr., they like fight for the fluoride, even tweets like, how can I fluoride my own water? You know, these kind of things. And people even defending glyphosates and all of that. It's insanity what's really happening. And that really increases the polarization and the split we're currently in.
Yeah.
Some people really want to hold on to the old word. And you have to understand, you know, some people can be convinced, some people, you know, not convinced, and they see the truth at some point. But the polarization is so severe with some people suffering so severely under not only cognitive dissonance, but an MK Ultra type of mind control, of brainwashing. They will never want to see the truth. They rather die and go with whatever they believe into their graves. And this polarization can and will create more conflict on an interpersonal or collective level as well.
Yeah, so we need to really cover how do we navigate this timeline split, because I think that's the biggest thing that most people have shared with me that they're struggling to deal with, especially with family members who believe the world is ending. Okay, for starters, the only way that you can have an open conversation between two people is that if you can both be respectful and curious towards the other person. And I want to acknowledge that most of the time that's not possible. Online, it's way less likely to happen. I'm talking about conversations that happen on the phone or, you know, directly in some way. Because honestly, what I deal with it online is I just deal with like a lot of just insults. And that's not, I'm not going to try to argue with someone who's come out right off the gate, insulting me, putting me down. There's no room. They're not being respectful. They're not being open. I can't speak to them. So in a lot of these cases, boundaries are necessary. But if you can be both respectful and curious about the other person's perspective, and again, you can only manage your side of this. You can't force someone else to be curious and respectful. The questions is can you avoid splitting? Like seeing them as all good or all bad? Can you see things that you like about the person that you can hold on to throughout the conversation? And we'll talk more about that in the second hour, how to deal with the splitting. But basically, there can't be insults, no name calling. Try to not make straw man arguments, which is like when you take their point and then you distort it. Instead, ask them, okay, what I heard you said is, and reiterate their point back to them and until you get it right, because there's a lot of miscommunications happening as well. And then try and address, once you get clear on the central point they're making, try and address the central point they're making. So you can't just dismiss them as stupid or brainwashed for believing certain things. You're trying to understand why they believe what they believe, where they maybe got that information from, and find parts of it, even a small part, like that you agree with. Like, you know, if you treat them basically with respect, they're more likely to treat you with the same. But if you come at with them in any hostility, if you look down on them, you're just going to get that back. So aim to understand first and then share your point of view with the intention to communicate, but not to convince. So it's not just trying to like get them on your side, just to share and communicate what your point of view is from your experience. And this is the only way that they might be open to alternative perspectives. It's probably not going to happen in a single conversation. It's probably going to happen over time. But a lot of people have come to their conclusion, not through facts, but through emotion. So I find that the only way to speak to people like this is to speak to the part of them that feels that strong emotion first, validate those emotions, and then ask them if they're open to hearing your perspective.
Yeah, that's great in theory. It's a great suggestions. Easier said than done for a few reasons, speaking out of experience. Number one, like as you just said, on social media, that's almost impossible because most people, even I see this when what I post about, you know, not seeing things black and white and then see Trump as the evil, you know, deceiver or no as a savior, but still people pull, like you said, strawman arguments when I share my like support of Trump and his team, like, oh, why do you think Trump is the savior? Well, that's not what I said. I never implied that, right? So right away, you can see how people's almost level of consciousness, if they're extremely black and white, they have an inability to see things nuanced. So there's also, because how you perceive the world is not just information, it's not just research, intellectualizing the whole thing. It's a reflection of a level of being, right? To see more the oneness, the interrelationship of it also naturally becomes more nuanced. Number two, what you just shared, it's great to, make people aware, spread some seeds of awareness, but some are so lost in cognitive dissonance, as I just said, and also not emotionally mature, right? To really be able to get their emotions out of the argument, their attachments, identifications with certain beliefs. And my best example, it's always a lesson for me to speak to my parents. I should know after all these years. But sometimes comes up, my mom, especially, she deals not only on the TDS, but also MDS, Musk derangement syndrome, especially in Europe and Germany, where my parents are. They have even more far leftist view than here in the US, I realized, because the media is even more controlled, or not even, same control, but the propaganda is even worse in all of Europe going against Trump. So you're going against the whole mind program. And I also had to learn to be externally considerate, right? Not to just push information on them or trying to convince them. That just it's a negative feedback loop. But what helps is just also asking questions. Where did you get information from? All of this, right? And because it's easy to get into argument, debate, and also easy to, not really listen to the other person, just trying to get your point across. And I'm definitely fault of that, absolutely. And it's easier said than done, but that's where more relationship psychology comes in, and communication. And out of this conflict, some relationships can be healed, right? We can find a common ground beyond all of that. But as you rightly says, it's really about the approach we take, and still being respectful, and definitely not getting into ad hominem personal attacks and all of that. And that's the road forward with this intense polarization.
Yeah. So if there isn't a possibility of being respectful and curious, and unfortunately, I do think it is best to avoid the conversation and instead find other topics that you can speak to them about. I have to do this with my parents. So if one of my parents makes a comment politically, I just ignore it and I focus on something else. I just act like I have conversational ADHD,
I wish I could do this.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And if the topics come up, at a family gathering, at Thanksgiving, just try the redirect. That's the easiest thing. Number one, you have to be emotionally mature to let it go. If you have some sort of charge, I got to tell this person, that's your own inner work to do, right? But if you can be a little bit neutral and objective in it, even psychologically prepare yourself, and if the person insists, you can just plainly state, hey, I really want to enjoy our time together and I don't want to make this political. Is it okay if we focus on another topic? Or even some people like to set boundaries ahead of time, and you don't want your boundaries to be harsh. If really you want to have a conversation with someone, especially at a family gathering, you have to get them one-on-one. Don't create on the dinner table, at the Thanksgiving dinner table, don't create it in a big conflict. It's really about conflict management skills, being able to focus on a different topic, being able to know when to pull back, try and do your best not to manage your own emotions, regulate your own nervous system. And in general, if you want to wake anyone up, if you want to make them see a different perspective, the only way to do so is to slowly plant seeds over time. You cannot force information on them. Don't give them information they didn't ask for. They have to show some degree of curiosity and openness. Otherwise, don't proceed, because you will get backlash. And the backlash, just use it as information that you've pushed it a little bit too far, basically. Use that as a sign that I need to back off. Doesn't mean that they're right. It just is a sign that you've activated them. You've put them into fight mode, sometimes even flight mode. And don't proceed, and then just treat them like a person. My general point of view when dealing with anyone who I maybe don't like or disagree with on some things is to find something I love about them and to really tune into their soul essence beyond their personality, and really tune into their soul and just appreciate them as a soul who's on this human journey with me. and going through their own experience of that. So it's like watering a plant. If you're going to wake someone up, you don't just water a plant once and then all of a sudden they're in full bloom. You give them little bits at a time. You can ask them questions rather than tell them stuff. That's really key. That shows your own curiosity. So you can show them info that contradicts their worldview, but then ask them what they thought about it, Like asking questions is like such a good approach to dealing with someone rather than telling them something. Like, where did you get that information from? Where did Trump say that, for example?
It just reminds me of two people who did this really well. Charlie Kirk, as a conservative, he was going around college campuses, literally just asking students questions.
Yeah.
So you like Kamala? What has she done? What do you like about her? These kind of things.
What are the policies?
What are the policies? Almost nobody could really answer that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the asking questions can reveal a lot of what they actually know or expose their ignorance at the same time.
Yeah, and do it with good faith. My only criticism of Charlie Kirk is he does it with a bit of like smugness sometimes.
That's a good point.
I can understand because of the people he's dealing with sometimes are like almost like
maybe Vivek
parodies.
is better.
Vivek is actually much better. Vivek does it with a lot more warmth. You want to just like... You know what I mean? Like, don't do it with smugness. Don't with the superiority. Do it with a sense of like warmth and lovingness and be like,
right.
That's the key thing. But patience is really key. Keep in mind, I started off as a very hardcore leftist who believed things based on just propaganda, based on never looking into what the person actually said. Even when we met, remember, I just hated Jordan Peterson because my friends all hated him because he was whatever. And then I actually got exposed to what Jordan Peterson actually said, watched some of his talks, and was like, he's not anything that I thought he was. So some people have just literally not been exposed to the information in a neutral way. So we have to be able to be patient. All right, so we're going to wrap up this first hour. We're going to continue talking about why is there this shift towards conservatism and how does this relate to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened in 2020, which Cosmos and Psyche, a very great book by Richard Tarnas, calls a cycle of crisis and contraction. How is this related to this lasting trauma we're seeing? How do these Saturn-Pluto conjunctions relate to an end of an era? What does that era represent? And we're going to really talk about how there's a lot of themes in these Saturn-Pluto conjunctions that we've seen play out over the past 4 years. And a lot of themes that explain, like, why are we shifting towards this more conservative era? He calls it actually radical conservatism, and what really is going to happen next as well. And then lastly, we're going to speak about how, especially, this is the most important part of it, Saturn-Pluto conjunctions relate to this concept of psychological splitting. We're going to talk about what that is, how we see it happening now, and how can we cope or handle this psychological splitting, because then psychological splitting is where you see other people who don't agree with you as all evil and the side who agrees with you as all good. So it's all good, all bad. And this is a big theme of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I think we're starting to see it heat up right now. We're going to talk about signs you're splitting, what to do when someone is splitting on you, and really how to work with this all good, all bad, you're evil, you're right, you're wrong energy that we've seen really become intensify. So if you want to listen to the second hour, go to Cosmic Matrix Podcast and you can click on join and become a member. You're going to say something?
Yeah, veilofreality.com, my website, the membership.
Yeah, veilofreality.com/membership, and you can join and get access to the second hour. And we will see those who are on the second hour on the second part.